Tonight we're going to be exploring the wonderful sound world and spiritual foundation of the iconic Japanese bamboo flute, the shakuhachi. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the wonderful new generation shakuhachi player, Adam Robinson, who represents something fresh and exciting in the world of shakuhachi, because the shakuhachi over the last 20 to 25 years has migrated wildly outside of Japan, has become popular all over the world, and we now have musicians who can study and become master performers without actually studying in Japan. And I think Adam represents the first generation of this fresh people in the shakuhachi world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Adam, who's been studying with me for the last 15 years or so. And he's just a great player and a great guy, and here he is.
Thanks so much, Ralph. If I have gotten anywhere with my study of the shakuhachi, it's because of this man right here and the efforts he has undertaken in his own teaching. And that doesn't just go for me, it goes to our whole community of students who have been touched by his ability on the flute and his ability to transmit the music. I want to talk a little bit about this instrument. So this is the shakuhachi. It's a bamboo flute that gets its name from the length of bamboo that was cut to make the instrument. Shaku means about a foot, it's a measurement term, and hachi means 8. So for a shakuhachi, we have about 1.8 feet or so of bamboo. You can see that it has 4 holes on the front, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 hole in the back for your thumb. It has an interesting mouthpiece in that it's a very open hole at the top with just a single cut made into this, give it this notched shape. I could say that it looks like a very simple instrument. Playing it is extremely complicated and brings you on a lifelong journey, it seems like so far. I'll play a little bit. Here's just the basic demonstration of shakuhachi would be to play these holes, right? So here it is. You can hear it's a minor pentatonic scale. And then we have all of these special techniques that this shakuhachi mouthpiece allows us to utilize to change the tone, to make the tone more vocal, and to bring out all these different colors and sound worlds that the shakuhachi gets into. So we have these techniques that we call meri and kari, or raising and lowering, lowering and raising. And we accomplish these techniques by tilting our head. We also use our fingers in special ways to create other pitches. So by uncovering these holes just a little bit, you can get these other tones. So you can hear there's a lot of options rather than just five pitches. Historically, this instrument came to Japan from China in the 8th century, and it sort of disappeared for a number of years, and then it reappears as the providence of a group of wandering Zen practitioners who use the flute as their meditation practice. And in order to talk about this with more authority, I'd like Ralph to explain a little bit about the komuso and the fukeshu.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yes. So sometime, maybe as early as the 1400s, there were these wandering beggar priests who played a bamboo flute that was something like this: vertical, notched mouthpiece, five finger holes. And gradually, these monks evolved into a Buddhist sect right around the year 1600, early 1600s. And this Buddhist sect was called the Fuke Shu, the Fuke sect. And they took their name from a prominent Chinese Zen monk, Chan Buddhism in China, it's called, of Tang Dynasty, 10th century. This monk named Fuke, or Puhua in Chinese. And this monk had a habit of wandering through the city, chanting a certain chant and ringing a bell. And according to the legendary history of Shakuhachi, a young monk of that era, and remember this is Tang Dynasty China, he was enlightened by the sound of Fuke's bell harmonizing with his chant. And he ran home and he picked up a bamboo flute just similar to this, and he played a piece on it. Excuse me. This piece he called Kyo-rei, which means something like empty, empty in the sense of infinite or the void, bell. And this concept of the infinite emptiness, void, and bell is the original spiritual basis of shakuhachi blowing as meditative or as a spiritual discipline. And so in Japan, these wandering monks, way back later in the 1600s, they formed this sect called the Fuke sect, and that was very complicated. It's a long history, had to do with government permission and many things, but they used the blowing of shakuhachi as their primary spiritual discipline, as opposed to sitting meditation, or maybe in addition to sitting meditation. Sitting meditation is called zazen, and this blowing meditation is called sui zen, blowing zen. And the main piece that they played was this kyo-rei. Now, how did this kyo-rei come from 10th century China to 17th century Japan? Well, it didn't, but they say it did. They made it up that it did. But this piece kyo-rei has been handed down at least from the 1600s and is still played today. And I'm going to play a little bit of it for you now. And the idea is breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, just like in meditation practice. But when you breathe out, you breathe into the flute and make a tone. And you can breathe with me while I do this. So I'm going to play you an excerpt of this empty bell kyo-rei. If you fell asleep, it's okay. So, this was the beginning of Shakuhachi blowing as a spiritual discipline. And over a period of 250 years, a series of pieces like this were developed and expanded, sometimes becoming more musical. And there's a whole repertoire of this music that's called Honkyoku, original music for Shakuhachi. And now, Adam, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Thank you for playing that, Ralph. The birds here in Greenpoint started going nuts while you were playing. um, so yeah, this the study of Honkyoku is extremely deep and forms, um, you know, the more advanced level of shakuhachi playing today. I think it like really is a lifelong study. And then in addition to Honkyoku, shakuhachi's history brings the instrument into the secular world as a musical instrument, uh, starting like at the beginning of the Meiji era. If that's I think that's correct. Um, where the shakuhachi starts joining in playing with the koto players and the shamisen players, um, playing two forms of music. Uh, if they're playing with the shamisen players, they call this form of music jiuta, or local songs. Local meaning Kyoto and Osaka, and the other genre is sokyoku or koto music, and the repertoire of koto music and jiuta music that we have in the shakuhachi world constitutes like another beautiful aspect of this tradition, and sort of is the next step in the history of the shakuhachi. So I'd like to play an example of some sokyoku that we play on the shakuhachi. Um, the honkyoku that Ralph played, I don't think originally they had much sheet music for it. It's mostly an oral tradition. But when you get to playing this ensemble music, we do have notation. This is notation that was developed specifically for the shakuhachi. In fact, each instrument in Japanese traditional music has its own form of tablature or notation, and that is unique to the instrument. And this piece is called Rokudan no Shirabe. It's the foundational modern koto piece. Modern meaning like the 1600s, 1700s. And it was written by Yatsuhashi Kengyo from Kyoto. And it's a very important piece for that instrument. And we're lucky as shakuhachi players that we get to play it on our flutes. I'll just play a little bit of the first part. And I'll also say that Rokudan no Shirabe is the title. Roku, it means 6. Dan means steps or levels. No Shirabe means a study of. So this piece is a study of 6 variations, and there are 6 kind of movements to this piece. I'll just play a little of the first one.
Adam, thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. So maybe you could already sense that if you imagine these wandering monks of the 1600s doing what I was doing before, well, it was pretty simple. And they could have a stick of bamboo and they're playing by themselves. Maybe they don't have to even be in tune. They're playing as a personal practice, the rough-hewn bamboo flute. But when they started, when shakuhachi players started to play with the stringed instruments, they had to really become musicians. And by the way, why did that happen? Really because at the time of what's called the Meiji Restoration, around 1868 into the 1870s, many aspects of the feudal era of Japan were abolished, including this Fuke sect. So the shakuhachi monks had to decide, oh, I'll just keep being my monk shakuhachi playing and I'll have to get another job or something, or become a musician. And the instruments had to change to play this music. They had to be more perfectly in tune. They had to have the inner bore coated with more of a lacquer type of coating to make the sound project more. And the players had to learn rhythm and pitch in ways that were not such a concern earlier. So it was a big change in shakuhachi life. Um, is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
No, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
it was a survival mechanism for the instrument, I think.
Yeah, survival mechanism for the instrument, but also they liked playing this music. And
Yes.
even before these changes officially happened in the late 1800s, these monks were often sneaking out of the temples, going into the town or the city, going to the tea houses and sitting in with the shamisen and koto players and learning to play that music. Um, so it was something I think that many players of even as early as the 1700s started to enjoy. Um, we'd like to talk a little bit about how knowledge in a musical tradition is transmitted from one generation to the next. And I think that because many of you are lovers of traditional musics of the world, you're probably aware that in many parts of the world, certainly in Asia and certainly in Japan, um, art forms, not just music, but including music, were traditionally transmitted from one generation to another in a kind of an all encompassing nexus of teaching and learning, giving and receiving knowledge. This might have taken the form of a lifelong master disciple, teacher student relationship, um, which was certainly true in the case of shakuhachi. And we hear that about that a lot in Indian music. Or maybe in a kind of a village communal setting that I think of Balinese or Javanese gamelan being like that, or in a court tradition where the musicians were part of a court, but this was their life. This was their life, and shakuhachi was transmitted from father to son and father to son, and the teachers that I had, um, I think, really represent the last generation, not father to son, they're still father to son, but the last generation of being so immersed in this one thing from birth to death. You're born with this music, you're surrounded with this music. Um, Nowadays, young players, they study the music from a teacher, but also in a university or academic setting. And they're exposed to so many other kinds of music through, of course, through recording technology, but now through the internet. And you can learn so many different things. You only used to just learn one thing from your father or from your teacher. And by the way, I say father to son, but the other big change in shakuhachi now is that women, it's traditionally a male instrument, women couldn't play it. But today women are playing it. And that actually happened first outside of Japan. And now it's happening inside Japan, and it's really wonderful. Anything you'd like to say about that?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
About teaching and learning?
Teaching and learning has been, that's like, if I were to consider what I'm doing as a shakuhachi player these days, I would say that I'm learning shakuhachi. It's an ongoing thing. And, coming up in sort of the modern era where, when I first started playing shakuhachi, it was 2012. So there were some things on the internet for it. There wasn't too much yet. Mostly what it is was people writing about their own, kind of writing about their own shakuhachi life, or YouTube was like barely a thing. You still had to like keep your videos under 10 minutes. There were a few videos of your teacher, Yamaguchi Goro, on YouTube back then. And so I was exposed to all of that stuff. And now that the whole world has opened up and there's so many recordings of amazing shakuhachi playing from all eras on the internet, it has on one hand been like really helpful as somebody whose primary art form is studying this music to hear so many different examples of shakuhachi playing, but it's also sort of thrown into relief in a very real way how valuable it is to learn from one teacher and learn from like focus primarily on one person's way of playing, because it's so representative of their shakuhachi life. It's almost like you it's like it's this ongoing process where your teacher is getting better at teaching you and you are getting better at learning, and that is such a valuable thing that doesn't happen when you're just researching on your own. And that to me has been like an extremely valuable part of learning the shakuhachi, is having access to a teacher like Ralph, who's like, top quality player and person. And I just feel extremely grateful, and that's what keeps me going as a shakuhachi practitioner. I don't really know if that was what we were talking about,
Yeah,
but
no,
it's
that's,
what I
yeah.
wanted to say.
I mean, so when I studied with my teachers in Japan, Yamaguchi Goro, Yamato Shudo, Araki Kodo, the fifth, who was my first teacher at Wesleyan University. Um, the teaching process is the student and teacher sit facing each other.
Mm.
The teacher plays at you. You're playing a piece together, and you hear your teacher because he's playing at you, and he's stronger than you usually.
Mm.
Nowadays, when I teach at him, he's stronger than I am. and the teacher doesn't talk, doesn't tell you stuff.
Just
You
nothing.
just like you get it or you don't get it. And then when you get it, you get it. So
Mm.
some people say, "Oh, that's not a good way to learn. It takes too long." So for example, there's a note on the flute. Here, would you play Ro and Su Meri? So Ro is our anchor note. And then there's a note a little bit above that, almost a half step, but not quite, called Su Meri. Yeah, kind of fuzzy, kind of mysterious, right? So when we're learning shakuhachi, we always play that note too sharp. But my teacher never said that's too sharp. So when we were playing and I was out of tune that note at that note, he'd push it a little bit at me. He'd play a little stronger at me. And then one day I said to him, "Oh, I'm playing that. Am I playing that too high? That pitch too high?" And he just said, "Yes, high." So that's okay. So that's how you learn things. It's osmosis. And then when you learn it like that, you'll never forget it. If he had said it to me the very first time, I wasn't ready to play it in tune. So yeah. Um,
It's I think at one point you told me, or maybe you wrote this somewhere. It's that kind of teaching. It like cultivates the ground in the student for self discovery,
yeah,
which is like
that's
a
right.
really
Yeah.
beautiful thing. I don't know. It's a great
Yeah.
way to learn, I think.
Yeah, so traditional musics all over Asia, all over the world, they're still being transmitted, but the way it's happening now is different. And young shakuhachi players in Japan are playing all kinds of music, popular music, jazz, contemporary music. There's no boundaries. And here in America, somebody like Adam's learning the traditional music, and he's been to Japan as well, and he's studying traditional music very seriously, and he's becoming a wonderful performer. But he's also very active in experimental music and new music and so on. So taking the instrument in new directions. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the really nice things about studying, well, learning this instrument in New York City, the place that I went to college and have a network of musician friends, is that yeah, it's been really kind of fun and rewarding to integrate this instrument into like my friends' consciousness, where like I play with a couple of my friends who I went to music school with, and it just opens up this whole other conversation about uh, timbre and texture and things we can do when we improvise. Uh, and it's just been a really nice thing to have on that scene. So it's
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot that can be done with it.
The shakuhachi is a multifaceted, complex, amazing instrument. I don't know how much you can capture that over Zoom, but please come on May 8th to hear Adam. It's a small, intimate setting, so if you haven't reserved yet, you better do it soon.
Mm,
I think we want to play another piece for you.
please.
You know, it's good to talk about music, but it's even better to play music and hear music. And even though we're doing this in the less than ideal setting to play and hear music, maybe it's still okay. Um, so, can you tell them a bit about Shika no Tōne?
Oh yes. Okay. Shika no Tone is one of the most famous shakuhachi honkyoku out there. It's one of the most widely performed, I should say. And the thing that makes it a distinct piece from all of the other honkyoku, um, is that it's traditionally played as a duet between two shakuhachi. The name Shika no Tone means the distant cry of the deer, and this piece is meant to evoke a deeply effervescent or yugen scene of two deer calling out to each other in the forest, and then eventually finding each other and you know,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
two deer calling to each other. And it kind of works over Zoom, I think. So we can try it because it's mostly call and response. We've
Mhm.
never done this before remotely, but um, we'll give it a try. And you can hear here, you can hear here that some of the techniques that shakuhachi players learned when they were playing the ensemble music with stringed instruments then became incorporated into their playing of the honkyoku pieces. I'm deer number one, he's deer number two. Well, we have no idea what that sounded like,
Yeah,
but
zero clue.
maybe it sounded okay. We hope so.
Mine.
Good experiment. Now, I see there's some Q&As here. How do we access those? Just click on them maybe, huh? Ah, there you go. Here's one. Welcome. You can put your questions in the question box.
Great.
Are there shakuhachi players today who are taking the instrument in new directions that you find exciting?
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, totally.
So everybody is taking the instrument in new directions, and it's very exciting.
Mm.
And if you're in New York on May 16th at the Japan Society, 337 East 47th Street, there is a group of dynamic top young players from Japan. They call themselves the Shakuhachi Five, and they will be performing at the Japan Society in New York. So you can check that out. And let's see.
Hmm. Okay. Somebody else said, "Is the mouth placement similar to a flute?" Um, I don't know.
Hmm.
The same but different, I guess. No, it's totally
Yep.
different.
It's interesting. I've been teaching the shakuhachi for many years, and I was a flute player myself before. Some flute players find it easier to play the shakuhachi than someone who didn't play the flute. But there are flute players who have a harder time with the shakuhachi than someone who didn't play the flute. The embouchure is very different. You are blowing across something, but it's a different embouchure. So similar but different, right?
Yeah, I think that with the shakuhachi, the way it's constructed, we we make all the sound ourselves with our face, kind of. There's like, you have to create this resistance with your own mouth. Whereas with
Mm,
the flute, you have a hole where you can blow over it.
right,
So
right,
there's some
right.
differences.
Um, okay, I'm going to change glasses, and
Oh yeah, I can keep reading these.
maybe I'll be able to read these better.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Is there a dance slash
Ah,
movement tradition connected to shakuhachi music? That's a good question.
Okay,
Can you
so
give me an idea of why?
the answer to that is no.
Right.
No. However, Shakuhachi does play in ensemble music with the shamisen, and that kind of music is called jiyuta, and there is a dance tradition associated with jiyuta that's called jiyuta mai, jiyuta dance. So sometimes shakuhachi players will be playing with a shamisen player, accompanying the shamisen player in that kind of music, and there's a dancer.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
so
that.
that's kind of nice. Oh,
Yeah.
are we supposed to type the answer? It says type answer.
Oh, okay. I guess we have the option of type answer or answer live. We're answering them all live. I'm not typing it. The
Yeah,
keyboard.
we're not typing answers.
All right.
Okay.
How did you both initially become interested in the instrument? Let's see. For me, I'll go first because my story's shorter. I was a saxophone student at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music back when it used to be called that in 2011, 2012. I graduated in 2012, and I heard the sound of the shakuhachi in David Lepato's World Music History class. He's a great guy. I love that guy. And he played this recording of Yamaguchi Goro, Ralph's teacher, and talked over the whole thing. And it was, a little bit. I was like kind of distracted, but it made an impression, and I wanted to pursue that sound. I thought it was a beautiful way. The way he was using his breath was so beautiful. I wish that my saxophone could sound as beautiful as this. Like, what's going on here? And so I kind of put that idea in the back of my head for a few years, and then I got connected to amazing flute player, flute maker, and actor here in the city named Perry Young, um, who sort of opened the door to me to take some lessons in playing shakuhachi and making the flutes, and it was really interesting. It seemed like a really great thing to pursue, so I just started going to him for lessons, and then he introduced me to Ralph eventually, and I sort of left the saxophone behind in a lot of ways, and
Yeah. Okay. So in my case, that's great. So in my case, I was a flute player, and believe it or not, it was 1968 or 69, and I was in San Francisco, and I was playing the flute here and there, and somebody gave me this record of South Indian flute music. And I listened to this record and I couldn't believe it. I loved this flute. The flute player was named T. Vishwanathan. Some of you might know about him. And I was enamored by this man's playing and that whole tradition of Carnatic Indian flute. And I looked at the back of the record and I saw that all the musicians on there were teaching at Wesleyan University that had a graduate program in ethnomusicology that they called world music. So, and that was before the Center for the World Music Institute. So I think Wesleyan was the first place to use that term. Anyway, I applied to this graduate program and I got in. And I got so excited I was going to go there. I was going to study ethnomusicology and study with this Vishwanathan. But he was back in India when I got there. And so I was very distraught. But I discovered there was another flute from Asia, and it was something called the shakuhachi that I never heard of by a miraculous, wonderful player and teacher named Araki Kodo the Fifth. And so I started to study, and I just fell in love with the instrument, and then a couple of years later went to Japan. So there's that story.
yeah.
Okay, what else we got here?
We have one more question. It looks like.
Besides the lulling tones, I'm glad they were lulling. I am hearing a sharp quirks. Yeah, so there's a lot of sharp quirks. I think they're more pronounced the way we're doing this, but when you repeat a note, you use your finger. That might sound like a sharp quirk.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of little slides and things, right, Adam?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We
Like,
don't do any articulating with our tongue on this flute. We do all of our articulating with our hands and let the breath flow freely through the instrument.
mm, okay.
That could be what he's hearing.
You want to show like re to tsumeri, where you slide up the
Oh
finger.
gosh, okay.
That's a quirk.
I can
That's a
do it.
quirk.
This is definitely quirky. Mm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that comes out as a quirk, but less so when you're in person. So
Yeah,
again,
it's more
when
movement.
again, please come on May 8th. Now, since there's a little time left, why don't we talk a little bit more about, oh, is there another question in there?
I think we're good. We got them all.
Oh, yeah, okay. Let's show a little bit of the notation because I
Oh
want
yeah.
to show, well, I'll start with the piece I played at the beginning, which is very simple. So first of all of this music was originally an oral tradition. There was no notation. And then when notation came in, it was like an outline, a memory guide. Oh, we want to help you remember this. So I'll just put down the main events. But it's not a detailed prescriptive notation like in Western music. It's something that helps you remember what you've already learned because you used to learn it without notation. Still today we learn some pieces first without the notation, singing them, and then. But anyway, the first piece I played uses this older kind of notation where you play a note and then you just hold it for the rest of your breath. And then you play the next note and you hold it for the rest of your breath. That little circle means take a breath. The next note and you hold it for the rest of your breath. So very, very simple. Then later you can show the um, the rokudan again.
Oh yeah.
You have to indicate rhythm when you're playing this ensemble music. So there's a series of dots, rhythm dots. That's a beat. Each one of those is a beat, and it helps you count the beats.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, each fingering has a character from the Japanese language, from the katakana syllabary. So this is called ro, and so it's written ro. You want to? Can you point to ro there? Point to it. Yeah, that round one is a ro, and this one is a tsu, and that's a tsu up there, and this one is a re, and this one is a chi.
There's a chi.
There's a chi. It looks like an F, and
Mm-hmm.
this one is called re.
There's a D. Oh my gosh, this is hard.
Yeah, there it is. So that's what it is. So each symbol represents a fingering, a fingering. Not really a pitch because we actually have different lengths of shakuhachi. This is the standard length. But if we play a longer one or a shorter one, ro is still fingered the same way, but the pitch that comes out is different.
Mm.
Yeah.